I'd like to welcome everyone today to the American Museum of Tort Law. My name is Melissa Bird. I serve as the director of the museum. The American Museum of Tort Law is located in Winsted, Connecticut. We are dedicated to educating the public about the concept of tort law and its role in American society. The museum aims to shed light on tort law, the history of it, and the significance of tort law, which also deals with civil wrongs and provides a means for individuals to seek compensation for injuries caused by others' negligence or misconduct. The museum features exhibits, artifacts, and interactive displays that explore various landmark cases, their impact on safety, justice, and corporate accountability in the United States. It serves as a thought-provoking resource for those interested in the legal system and its influence on consumer protection and public welfare. We are proud to sponsor this discussion today on sports and torts, specifically the historical problem of foul balls injuring fans while watching America's favorite pastime, baseball. With us today are guest speakers, Jordan Skopp. He is founder of foulballsafetynow.com. Dr. Ken Reed, Sports Policy Director for the League of Fans.org, and attorney Greg Wilkowski. But before we introduce our esteemed guests, I would like to take this opportunity to encourage all who are watching to visit our website, which is www.tortmuseum.org. Take a virtual tour, see what we're all about, check out our online gift shop. We are stocked full of books as well as conversation starters. Today, Dr. Ken Reed will be moderating a roundtable discussion with Jordan Skopp and attorney Greg Wilkowski. He is Sports Policy Director for League of Fans.org, which is a sports reform project. League of Fans was founded by Ralph Nader to fight for the higher principles of justice, fair play, equal opportunity, and civil rights in sports, and to encourage safety and civic responsibility in the sports industry and culture. Reed is the author of How We Can Save Sports, a game plan, and several other books. An updated paperback edition of How We Can Save Sports was released in February 2023. Now I will turn things over to Dr. Reed, who will introduce today's panel. Hi, Ken.
Hi, thanks, Melissa, and thanks everyone for attending. As Melissa said, today's topic is foul ball safety. Safety for all sports participants, including fans, athletes, coaches, officials, etc., is a big part of our mission statement at League of Fans. You can see a lot of our work at leagueoffans.org. And our particular safety topic is foul ball safety in baseball parks across the country. You might realize that Major League Baseball, in a lot of cases, has extended the nets behind the field across the dugouts, but there are still many, many cases where that's not the case, and we're still having foul ball injuries across the country through the minor leagues, major leagues, college baseball, etc. So while significant improvements have been made at the major league level in recent years, some minor league and college baseball parks still lack effective screen protection for foul balls. And it seems like with Major League Baseball teams starting spring training this week, this is a good time to address the topic at hand. So let's get right to it. I'll introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Jordan Skopp, a philanthropist and lifetime baseball fan from Brooklyn, New York. He is the founder of foulballsafetynow.com, which is dedicated to increasing fan awareness of the dangers of foul ball injuries. Conservative estimates are that 5,000 fans have been injured, some seriously, by foul balls in major and minor league ballparks since 2012. Jordan's efforts have received national news coverage, as well as international press in Korea and Japan. He is the author of a forthcoming book about foul ball fan safety and has interviewed and advocated for numerous victims and families affected by foul ball injuries. Our second panelist is Greg Wilkowski. Greg is a successful litigator with experience from pre-suit investigation through trial. After practicing for years at Winston & Salem, LLP, a leading international law firm on some of the country's largest cases, Greg opened his own law practice in Chicago, Illinois, to serve investors, consumers, and small businesses. Greg is in the middle of an ongoing lawsuit regarding a foul ball injury, and we'll learn more about that very shortly. He graduated from the University of Michigan Law School, where he was awarded the Craig Spangenberg Award for exceptional ability in oral advocacy. Thank you both for participating today.
Now, thank you, Ken. Glad to talk about these issues today. It's a timely topic, as you mentioned, with the all the pitchers and catchers at least reporting, and I think the rest of the teams have reported now. The rest of the personnel as well for spring training. So,
yeah, today and this weekend. I think after this weekend, everyone will be back in spring training in Florida and Arizona. Let's get started with Jordan. Jordan, could you start by giving us just a brief overview of the historical problem of foul balls, and in some cases, bats actually entering the stands at baseball games and injuring fans?
Good to be here, and really appreciate the forum that we're having today. And thank you for all the guests coming. And I want to tell you just briefly that I'm a big baseball fan, but unfortunately today, as a big baseball fan, I'm been forced to pay attention to the problem of the foul ball issue. So it sort of kind of tarnishes the regular baseball fan in me, because what I know are the regular risks that the fans face. But I kind of caught on to this in 2019 after a little girl was seriously injured in Houston. And it did get a lot of publicity for a very short time. And there was also an ESPN video the same year, which is on the website at foulballsafetynow.com. It was a 5-minute ESPN production. I thought it was very good, very well done. It kind of showed a whole bunch of foul ball incidents. And what you saw in 2019 still persists today in 2024. Unfortunately, there's no regulation. So even the major league clubs that talk about their netting is now much further down. There was a man blinded in Pittsburgh this past summer in 2023. And the minor leagues are a big mess, because where those two little children got seriously injured when I got involved in 2019, that little girl in Houston, she was just past end of dugout. When I learned about that incident, I learned about another little girl in 2017 at Yankee Stadium, also just past end of dugouts. I know of at least 43 ballparks in the minor leagues today, unless they've changed from the winter to now, 43 minor league ballparks with no netting past end of dugouts. And they hit the ball at 100 miles an hour down there too. So I've been trying to shine a light on this issue. The website is detailing all of the things that I've tried to do. I've actually rented out airplanes to try to tell people in those markets that, you know, foul ball is not all about fun. Sometimes foul ball, parents need to know, could be flirting with danger or worse. So that was the purpose of the airplanes, because unfortunately, people are not reminding those fans in those local cities about the regular reoccurrence of straight line drives, beelines into seats at 100 miles per hour. You know,
Jordan, actually,
yes,
beyond injuries, there's been some people actually killed in the past, right?
Yes, I've been in touch with Erwin Goldblum. He's unfortunately the widower of Mrs. Goldblum. Linda Goldblum was killed in Dodger Stadium in August of 2018. And Erwin has been participating in some of these virtual press conferences, about 6 or 7 of them that I've had. And he's been interviewed for potentially the book or the documentary that should be coming out sometime, because what I've been doing is collecting these interviews, victim impact statements, and even stories from baseball players who have been quoted in major newspapers after these high-profile incidents that they wouldn't allow their own families to sit in these sections. But in some of these detailed interviews that I've had with probably around 30 baseball players, mostly former minor leaguers, some with major league experience, it seems to come out in those interviews as well that their families were always informed about where to sit, but at the same time, they knew someone in their community was sending someone to a hospital at some point, and that's not a good feeling to carry. And but they're getting an opportunity to kind of unload and unburden themselves, and I think we're just really getting started with that. And yeah, it's been quite an interesting experience. So yeah,
Okay.
a lot of work to be done. We know of around at least 43 children from 2008 that have been injured in the majors and the minors, and some with serious head injuries. And as I mentioned, there were 2 children critically injured over this past summer in the minor leagues. So thank you for having me.
Okay, well, thanks, Jordan, for that overview. That kind of sets the stage for this discussion. Greg, let's bring you in. You're currently representing a client who was injured by a foul ball at a professional minor league baseball game. Could you tell us about your client and what your lawsuit is all about?
Sure. And to add just a little bit more color to what Jordan's talking about here with the prevalence of injury, it's not also just these high profile incidents that you may have heard about in the past couple of years, or since 2015 or so, with ESPN doing a documentary and major newspapers picking up on the sad case of Linda Goldblum. Um, with pitchers pitching the ball now very, very fast. So, I read a statistic the other day that the prevalence of 100 per mile fastballs is something like triple what it was just in 2018. And in 2018, 100-mile-per-hour fastballs was way more than it was in the 1970s when Nolan Ryan was first clocked to pitch over 100 miles per hour. So it doesn't even make the news anymore when you have a pitcher throwing that hard. Now you have batters that are better conditioned as well, and they're swinging the bat more accurately and harder than ever. And what that combines to do is to send foul balls into the stands at over 100 miles per hour. Now, under the old sort of understanding of the assumption of the risk that you do when you're a fan in attendance at a baseball game, and you go and there's an announcement that, hey, please be aware of balls and bats flying into this stand. Well, that doesn't really account for the fact that nowadays you can pay attention all you want. You can't stop a 102-mile-per-hour baseball flying at you, whether or not you have advance notice of it or not. So, Bloomberg, I believe it was, did a good study a couple of years ago to look at just how often is this happening in the major leagues, where balls are being hit into the stands and people are being seriously injured. And what they found is, just in the major leagues, is that they had something along the lines of 1,800 people a year being injured. That's 2 for every 3 games that are played in the major leagues, and that didn't even count the minor leagues. And the difference there is that the minor leagues typically have not as much netting as the major leagues do, and the players are still hitting the ball very, very hard. The pitchers are still pitching the ball very, very hard. So you have a whole other issue of the minor league fan injuries out there. So
Well, I would
represent.
jump in, Greg, just
Please.
to jump in quickly to that, is that college baseball now is becoming more and more popular with more and more fans attending, and we haven't even addressed the college problem, but I'm sure it's a serious issue at the college level as well.
And they play with metal bats too in college, or
Right.
aluminum. So they hit the ball very hard too. And there's actually some very good cases that have come and developed out of the issue of foul ball injuries in college, because typically college won't have like arbitration clauses that force you into arbitration, so you can actually sue. And some lawyers in California have developed some very good case law here that's been helpful to our case as well. So I represent a woman in Peoria, Illinois, who was smacked with a foul ball in the eye and shattered her eye socket, and really bad injury. And this was almost 12 years ago. And what she wanted to do, she learned that her local stadium where she was injured still does not have netting even above the dugouts. So it has the netting behind kind of home plate, which has been standard since the year like 1910. but no netting above the dugout and no netting further beyond the dugout, so down to the foul poles. And on top of that, there are people in this stadium, particularly, that are injured every single year. It's reported by the local paper. And so she very courageously brought a lawsuit against the minor league baseball team here in Peoria, Illinois. And it's not your typical personal injury lawsuit. And there's a reason for that, because the elephant in the room when it comes to foul ball injuries and lawsuits is something called the baseball rule, or the baseball liability rule, which basically says that, hey, as long as the owners and operators of a stadium have netting behind the dugout, that's typically enough. And you go to the game and you know that, and you sit in an area where they don't have netting. If you get hit by a foul ball, that's your own fault, and you are not allowed to bring a successful lawsuit against the owners or operators of that stadium. So Miss Klatt brought a kind of a creative lawsuit, and so she's suing the team in order to get that netting up there. That's what she wants. And she's suing under a couple of different legal theories, not just personal injury to prevent future injuries to fans there. And I'm happy to talk about those theories. You know, one is the Consumer Fraud Act. So I'm in the state of Illinois, and many other states as well have statutory consumer fraud acts, which basically says, well, fraud is wrong. And they try to prevent people from engaging in fraud, and they incentivize these lawsuits. Well, if you are being sold a ticket to a game by the owners of the stadium, and the owners of the stadium are saying this is a perfectly safe place, they say, look at our big jumbotron that we have, look at our mascots, it's fun, you should bring your families here, you should bring your children here. And they don't tell you that if you sit in the areas that are unprotected by netting, you actually have a higher risk of being struck by a foul ball, and perhaps seriously, and because people are struck there every single year, every single season, that possibly constitutes fraud under the Illinois Consumer Fraud Act. There's another aspect to the suit, which is creative, which, you know, baseball stadiums in America typically aren't like entirely private enterprises. Your tax dollars probably go to support the owners of stadiums in some way, whether it's the donation of property for the stadium, whether it's taxpayer funding for the operation of the stadium, whether it's taxpayer funding for improvements that are going to be made to the stadium. And there should therefore be like a corresponding obligation on the part of the owners of the team and the operators of the stadium to make certain improvements to ensure that people are safe. So she's also suing the city on the basis that in the city's name, actually, in Peoria's name, that the city of Peoria should force the operators of the stadium to make certain upgrades that will ensure fan safety.
So is this a class action suit at this point?
So it's brought on behalf of a class. Certain claims are brought on behalf of a class because, so if you go to a stadium, everybody here has been to a baseball game. Everybody in attendance has been to a baseball game. You likely have not been injured yourself at a baseball game. Maybe you haven't even seen anybody get injured at a baseball game. But with the publication of all these statistics by Bloomberg, with the admission by baseball teams in the press that people are being routinely injured at these games, this is not an individual issue for a particular fan who has been injured and then needs to seek redress from the owners of the team. I mean, this is really a class-wide suit that should be brought, because it should be brought on behalf of all fans who are going, including those fans who don't understand the risk, especially those fans who don't understand the risk, fans who bring their kids and families and sit in unprotected areas and don't understand and don't know what the operators of the stadium know, which is how many people are actually injured there, and which, if you ask them, they're not going to tell you. So that's why it's being brought on a class-wide basis. Certain claims are being brought on a class-wide basis.
Now, I know most teams have gone to paperless ticketing system, but in the old days, they used to be on the back of your ticket in very, very small print. you are accepting all risk when you enter the stadium, basically.
Mhm.
Is that's the baseball rule, I guess. Is how do they do that now with tickets that are just on your phone as you enter? I don't see any small print anymore. Is it just assumed, or what's
Oh,
their?
it's there. It's there. Yeah, because you aren't
You have
looking
to go search
for the
for it. Yeah.
1.5 size font that says you assume the risk of any foul ball or bat smacking you in the face or your kids in the face. But it's still there. So that actually is not that's the baseball rule, but that's not what gives it legal effect. It's a long-standing judicial doctrine, basically judge-made law through cases going back 100 years that says if you go and you sit in an area that's not protected by netting, you assume the risk of being hit in the face with a foul ball, and your kids assume that risk as well. But what is on those tickets, which is a real problem in not just baseball, but in a lot of industries, is something called an arbitration clause. And one reason that you don't see a lot of these lawsuits is that if you bring it, you might be forced into a private arbitration where it's not going to be in a public courtroom. It's going to be with a private judge. You most of the time cannot bring those on a class-wide basis. And it's a huge disincentive to bring in these sorts of lawsuits. And it's not just in baseball, it's in a lot of industries. You know, if you go on a cruise and you're injured, you probably can't sue them in a courtroom. If you buy a product and you're injured, you might not be able to sue them, the manufacturer of the product. So, but on the back of that ticket, it will say you assume the risk. And, that's kind of a summary of the baseball rule.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering why the Peoria Chiefs are unwilling to put up netting. It seems like a fairly quick and easy fix to this problem rather than paying all their legal fees. What is it about Peoria that's resistant to follow other major and minor league teams that have extended netting at least past the dugouts? Why are they fighting this so hard?
Well, first, it's the same sort of disincentive that a lot of teams have, either to not put netting from the end of the dugouts down to the foul poles, or to not put netting above the dugouts if it's a college team. And that's because of the baseball rule and the Baseball Liability Act, which says that the owners will not be held liable for a lawsuit. So there's no carrot to do it, and there's no stick to do it. And that's, I think, why you have a lot of hesitation and a lot of why you just don't see a lot of rapid change among baseball teams until someone like the commissioner of baseball comes in, like he did in the major league several years ago, and says every team has got to have netting up down to the foul poles for most stadiums, and most stadiums did put that netting up. Now, that doesn't get rid of the baseball rule. If you're injured when you're there, you still probably don't have a lawsuit. But there's not much of a carrot or a stick to incentivize that behavior. So it's an industry that is it's tough to change, I think.
Well,
It's
Jordan, you probably,
unregulated. It's
yeah,
unregulated.
It's unregulated, as
You know what
Jordan
I mean?
says.
Yeah.
I
And-
think both of you, or Jordan in particular, with your history, you probably heard all the excuses. I know I've heard some stadium or team owners and general managers or marketing people say they're hesitant to put screening up all the way down there because it hinders the view of the customers in those high price seats, and they don't want to do that. But I always found that interesting because some of the highest price tickets are right behind home plate where there's been netting for years. So that doesn't seem to hold water. And now that a lot of the major league teams have put the netting down, at least past the dugouts, I didn't hear any complaints really last year. How about you?
Well, Ken, I just want to follow up on Greg's point. They don't tell you in advance how many injuries will be happening. Like, we're in February, mid-February. I believe most teams know pretty much more or less how many line drives, B lines, will be going into exposed sections where there's kindergartners sitting. And why aren't they telling us in February to plan in advance? And they're not. And I feel like once the families know that baseball has advanced knowledge, more or less, they keep track of every ball, the arc, the launch angle. I was watching Sunday Night Baseball a couple of years ago, and it was a nationally televised game. Maybe they had all the bells and whistles and the graphics, but the ball leaves the bat at 108 miles per hour. It goes over a net down the right field line. And this was in 2022. So this was long after the Rob Manfred 2019 announcement about all MLB teams doing extensions. Ball shoots into the seat at 108, and all you heard one of the three guys in the booth say, "That went in fast." Now, one of the three said, "Hey, there could have been a kindergarten class there." And of course, then the other one would say, "Yeah, of course. It's no way for children." I think baseball really, to be truly transparent, needs to tell the families in middle February, adults, you want to flirt with danger or worse, go ahead. Maybe similar to like running with the bulls in places where you're allowed to run with bulls. But I think you need to be over 18 to do that, and you're not allowed to bring your children. That would really be the proper gesture, retroactive the last 100 years, probably should have been portrayed that way and sold that way. But we're having this discussion now, so maybe that will lead to that and bring an epiphany of outrage to some of the listeners and attorneys in the audience. And they'll contact me and we can have another discussion. So appreciate that.
One of the other issues these days, Greg touched on the speed of the balls now, because the pitcher is throwing harder and the ball's coming off the bat harder. We also have the phenomenon of a huge percentage of the audience looking at their cell phones during the game. So they're not even paying attention at all anymore, making this whole thing a lot more dangerous.
Which
Well,
they're
people should
encouraged to
have the right to
download.
do what they want. Sorry, Greg.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say people should have the right to relax at a baseball game, and they're coming relaxed. And if they were told not to be relaxed, then the regulators would start paying attention, saying, well, since you're finally sharing with us the reality, we have to have a new discussion. Is it wise to bring your child 18 or under? And that's what baseball's not looking for. They're not looking to have, we're sitting on a keg of conversation and discussion right now about where we need to go. And we're having it now. So I hope, there'll be some action before, spring training gets fully underway, where there's games. And now MLB is involved with these new partner leagues. So I'm not only doing investigations on the minor leagues, but now these new partner leagues, I'm also finding, pretty bad netting all around. So that'll be something else to add to the website of Foul Ball Safety Now soon.
Go ahead, Greg.
Ken, and that argument, though, that was popular a few years ago when certain major league teams were erecting nets, that fans do not want to be obstructed when they pay for a ticket and go to a game. And there's even there's case law going back decades and decades talking about the fact that, well, what if people want a foul ball during the game? That's like a right that you get to catch one. And, you want to go to a game and enjoy baseball as America's pastime has been enjoyed without netting, for decades and decades. In 2023, I looked up the statistics. 2023 had over 70 million fans in attendance at Major League Baseball games. This is several years after netting has gone up most of the time down in the foul poles. So they're going to be sitting, in behind those nets, and it has not seemed to have a deterrent effect to people, enjoying America's pastime. So I was, if there was a reason for skepticism of that argument, then it has not been borne out. It's totally contradicted by fan attendance data.
Right. And I've sat at many games in those seats, and after about 5 minutes, you don't even notice it anymore.
Right.
I'm concerned about Peoria. Let's go back to the Peoria Chiefs. The team, as part of your lawsuit, the Chiefs the parent club is the St. Louis Cardinals. And I'm wondering, if the Chiefs organization is getting any pressure either from the city of Peoria itself or the Cardinals to go ahead and take care of this, because it seems like it's a PR problem, if not a legal problem in their minds, that they're letting this go.
Hey, Greg, do you mind if I jump in on this one?
Sure, go ahead, please. Yeah.
All right. So a couple of years ago, I actually rented out an airplane, and they flew over the ballpark because they were one of the 120 that were the worst of the worst with the no netting above the dugout. Recently, I got a call from the general counsel of the St. Louis Cardinals. Coincidentally, there was the child that I had mentioned, one of the children that I had mentioned that was critically injured this past summer was also in Peoria, Illinois. And it wasn't because there was no netting above the dugout, which is where Greg is pursuing his lawsuit with the victim, Sandy. But coincidentally, it was down the right field line where it could have been at one of the other 43 places as well. So we got some local media for one of the other 43 minor league ballparks where there's no netting past end of dugouts. The ball actually found its way down the right field line in Peoria, and there was a little girl critically injured. I actually found out that she was in critical care, upgraded to intermediate care. So that was good news when the hospital gave me some information. So that being said, the Peoria Chiefs are an affiliate, similar to like if you were a freshman in college. There's 4 levels of minor league baseball, freshman to senior. So the Cardinals pay the salaries of 4 different affiliates. And the lowest level, there could be 2 equally lower levels, the freshman class, if you will, the Peoria Chiefs. The St. Louis Cardinals do pay the salaries of the Peoria Chiefs. So I would think it's their business to also know that Peoria is keeping up with the better standards or doing more to make sure that their ballpark is up to speed. And it's also the Peoria Chiefs share a field with the Bradley Braves, which is an NCAA level team. And I reached out to the athletic director, the president over there as well to see if they want to engage in any discussion. But I did get notice from the St. Louis Dispatch. They actually did do an article, which you can find, guys, at Foul Ball Safety Now. And we didn't get a million comments, but we got 7 or 8 comments that were in favor of what we were doing. And that got the lead counsel, Mike Whittle, to call me on the telephone. And that was kind of like, he wants to talk to me. So the thing I said to Mike, and that's the lead counsel for the St. Louis Cardinals. So I did get the attention of the owner, Bill DeWitt. And I actually did interview some man who was blinded at the St. Louis ballpark in 2016. So there may be some, that's on their radar, but they're not really taking it seriously. And what happened was I found that they were not taking it seriously because Mike Whittle's and our call was more like 3 minutes long. When I said, Mike, don't you think it's the responsibility of the St. Louis Cardinals to pay the salaries of the Peoria Chiefs to keep up with the upgraded netting? And he says, you'll have to call them. Meaning, like I said, did you know what their new plans were for 2024? And he says, oh, you need to call those guys. And then we were sort of like going separate ways. So that was the end of that call. So Ken, bring it back to Greg. Bring it back to Greg. Sorry, I just wanted to give you that. Yeah.
I imagine some of the pushback from some of these minor league teams is the cost, but I know in the case of the Peoria Chiefs, they have a beautiful, nice big jumbotron that they've put up. Greg, what exactly would it cost, or Jordan, to put netting down to the foul poles at Peoria Stadium? I mean, we're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, are we?
So, well, the numbers can vary depending on what type of stadium it is. Now, I've seen figures at ballparks around the country, anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 to put netting up. If it's a more complicated stadium and requires more construction, it'll get into the tens of thousands of dollars. But it's not something that should be cost prohibitive. And I say should be because, in the past several years, Peoria and other teams as well have made capital improvements to their stadium. In the case of Peoria, they put up a very nice, very beautiful jumbotron, which is all the more reason that you should put up netting. um, and so there are constantly capital improvements that are being made to stadiums all around the country, and it's just a matter of priority. And whether it's not, it's going to be a push from the major league affiliate or the initiative of the owners of the minor league team. It truly is a matter of priority. There's one other reason, though, that it should not be cost prohibitive, and that is because, and I mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again because in Peoria's case, it's true. They get millions and millions of dollars in public money, and it is not the case that these stadiums are entirely private enterprises that have entirely made it on their own. The same story, can be found almost with the history of any stadium around the country, where owners are asking for public largesse in order to fund and operate and improve and build their stadiums. And these are not small numbers that are being spent by the taxpayer on these stadiums. And in fact, in the case of Peoria, would dwarf the amount that it would cost to put up netting. So if we're in an era where you have the Baseball Liability Act in the state of Illinois, and in several other states have codified it, but there's some sort of common law in almost all states having to do with immunizing the owners and operators of stadiums against personal injury lawsuits. And at the same time, you're getting public money, and you're not putting up these sort of basic safety protections after it's been publicized, and there's been investigations by media outlets showing how often people are injured every couple of games. What are you doing? What are we doing here with? Should you be operating a baseball stadium? There's certain things that the owner should be charged with, and that's one of them, is making sure that there is sufficient netting for fan safety.
Yeah, if taxpayers are funding these stadiums from infrastructure or little improvements to completely owning the stadium, and it was built on taxpayer dollars, it seems at the very least they should be protecting those very taxpayers that are funding that stadium.
Yeah, and it comes in a lot of different forms too, whether it's the donation of property downtown, prime real estate downtown, um, for the erection of a stadium, whether it's, municipal bonds that are going to be sold, whether it's debt that is going to be forgiven. So it can come in a lot of different forms, but it's, these are our stadiums. This is your stadium. This is my stadium. These are not just solely, the owners and operators of the stadiums. It's not only theirs. It belongs to all of us, in my view. And that's what the money trail would suggest too.
Okay, just a couple more questions and we'll get to some Q&As from the listeners, but
Ken,
yes.
sorry to interrupt you. Can I interject with a comment from one of the people that are listening? I just thought it was sort of interesting, and then go
Okay.
back to the questions. This is from Judith McMorrow, and she writes that she teaches torts, and one of the cases that she includes is Costa versus the Boston Red Sox in 2004 in her materials. She says that Massachusetts has eliminated the assumption of risk and instead analyzes this issue as no duty. With the increasing use of netting, that sets a basis to challenge the old no duty framework, since the industry standard is increasingly moving to improve netting and recognition of the unknown, in quotes, risk to baseball patrons. So I just wanted to throw out her comment. It's interesting, and see if anybody else wanted to speak to that.
Well, I'll mention, so Judith has made a great comment. So there's a couple of states that have kind of bucked the trend a little bit. in terms of where the law was and where it is now. One of them is Massachusetts. Another one, I haven't done like a 50-state survey, but in researching these issues, California is another one with some really good case law where the judges and court systems and advocates have basically said there shouldn't be some sort of blanket immunity for the operators of baseball stadiums here. These are states where there's not a statute governing this issue specifically. And so there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of updating the law when it makes sense to do so. And it's analyzed under the current standard where netting should be is increasingly expected. And netting, including all the way down to the foul poles, is increasingly expected to keep people safe from injuries that will happen otherwise. Do they have a duty to people to put that netting up? And so I'm not 100% sure about Massachusetts, but if that's one of them, then that's terrific. California is another. In my state of Illinois, and in a few other states, Colorado, Arizona, I think New Jersey, we actually have a statute that the legislature has passed that says that basically has codified the baseball liability rule. So there's a little bit less flexibility in my own view, in my own research. But if Judas students have some great case law and ideas, I'd love to hear them too, because we're stuck here trying to fight off the Baseball Liability Act, which, as an example, in this case that we brought, different claims: fraud claim, personal injury claim for future injuries, a taxpayer act claim based on the public funding of the stadium. They responded with, well, the Baseball Liability Act, here it is, Judge, it bars not just the personal injury claim, it bars the second one, it bars the third one, it bars the fourth one. This is what the legislature did, whether or not Greg likes it. And, this is what we're going to rely on. So I'm hoping, that Illinois will catch up with some of the states who have been a little bit bolder here in developing the law.
It seems like another area that we could start getting pressure from would be the players themselves. I know I've seen lots of clips of players who have hit a ball and injured somebody, and they're just horrified. And a lot of those players that Jordan touched on earlier, minor leaguers and major leaguers, have said, we want the netting up there. It's scary and dangerous for us to be drilling these foul balls into the stands. So I would think that Major League Baseball Players Association and now the minor leaguers actually have been allowed to unionize as well.
Just to jump in, Ken,
Yeah.
we've heard that there was 4 different collective bargainings between the MLB and the union over the year. Maybe they do it every 4 years, but maybe over the last 15 or 20 years, during 4 separate collective bargaining sessions, supposedly it was negotiations about nets. But how about the union saying it's a non-starter? Our guys don't go to work and hit 100-mile-an-hour beeliners at kids. But I haven't heard that. So I would really love to get my hands on what was really discussed. Wink, wink. All right, next. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Well, let's wrap. Greg, what's the status currently on your lawsuit? And then we'll take some questions.
We're fighting an arbitration clause right now. So as is often the case in lawsuits, there's a motion to dismiss the complaint that's filed. And in this case, there was one to move us into arbitration on the basis that my client, even though she didn't read it or was even aware of the arbitration clause, should be required to arbitrate her claims with like a private judge. Because on the e-ticket, on the virtual ticket, at some point there is arbitration language, and that's a body of law that's, I think, ripe for dissection as well, and hopefully blowing that up. But so we are fighting an arbitration claim right now so that we can get things on track with the suit and talk about the issues that we should be talking about and litigating the issues we should be litigating. because, arbitration is a very expensive proposition for any consumer, and it's a big disincentive for a lot of lawyers to bring all sorts of cases. You can be paying anywhere from $1,000 to tens of thousands of dollars to have an arbitrator hear your case. And that's especially the case if it's, in certain forums, and in if it's retired federal judges are not cheap. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay. Well, Melissa, do you have some questions for us from the audience?
Well, I do have another comment from Judith, who said the creative lawyering we see in the gun liability may be a case study of how to erode statutory protections. So that's one of her ideas towards answering Greg's comment earlier. Next, we have Laura, who will be our next audience question.
I feel like my question has already been answered because I wanted to comment on how there is the same sort of arbitration clause on the Jumbotron, right? When you first get there and they make it all cutesy about how you could get hit in the head with anything, and they make little jokes about it, and then you're done. But it seems like you kind of answered that question for me already. Thank you.
I can jump in a little bit. In Japan, it's actually front and center, the culture, when it comes to expressing the risks of foul balls. They may present it fun and cutesy, but they go out of their way. Their team attendance on every aisle. The nets are higher, farther, and wider. When balls do make their way over the net, you really do have every chance to get out of your way. They allow adults, I don't think they allow children, but I'm assuming it's only adults, that if they do want to sit in a dangerous section or a higher risk section, they will actually provide a glove and a helmet. Like, go ahead, flirt with danger or worse, knock yourself out. And that's the way MLB should have been presenting this matter all along. That's my opinion.
I love the glove and a helmet. Thank you.
Well, check it out. All right.
Yeah, that's interesting though, that, when you hear there's the resistance to the change in major and minor league baseball, Jordan, knows a lot about how the Japanese league does it, and it's totally different. And it's a recognition that people are injured, and they actually take precautions, and I think have a much lower rate of people being seriously injured there. So that's the Japanese league is a major league too. I mean, behind Major League Baseball, it's number 2 or 3 with Cuba. I don't know, but it's very popular. So
yep. They've delivered Shohei Ohtani and a couple others here to the United States from that league. Are there any other legal challenges going on currently, Greg, besides your lawsuit that you're aware of?
So I periodically do like a review to see what arguments are being made and if there's any sort of good case law development. Right now, I'm not aware of any other cases where they're trying to get past the Liability Act, common law, or statutory. But there's been some good developments in the past couple of years with, I'll have to look at Massachusetts now, but I've had to rely on California case law as persuasive law in Illinois by citing to some cases there where the judges basically say, well, why don't I think that we have the right here to take a look at where what the safety standards should be and what the obligations of a team should be, given that times have changed. And given that in 1913, when the first really big Liability Act or liability baseball rule case came out in Missouri, and the judges said, you assume the risk when you go to a game that you're going to be injured, a lot has changed since then. So there's been some very good developments actually by some lawyers out in California. In Mays v. La Sierra University's one, Summer v. the Federation of Baseball's another, and this is all since 2020. So gives me hope.
Is there a model stadium out there that's done things right in major or minor league baseball that, Jordan, you would say this is how every stadium should be? Is there a best and maybe even a worse situation?
Two letters. No.
Okay.
Okay.
Hannah, any
No
more questions?
no regulation. Somebody's got to come in there and hang a stamp, certificate of occupancy. Come on down, children. Until then, people are getting blinded in Pittsburgh and Major League ballparks, 2 children critically injured. There's no regulation. There needs to be oversight. Someone needs to say, you know, they've kicked the can down the road long enough and it's time. We're going to come in. We're going to tell them how high, how far, how wide. It's going to go hand in hand. There'll be hopefully no more baseball rule. Owners know that if balls do make it over the nets and hit somebody, they'll have an open door to the lawyer's office and will be able to sue. It's a detriment. People who do get injured are going to lawyers, and lawyers don't want to go near it because they don't want to work, you know, on contingency. It's not like somebody got hit by a car or something, and you know they're going to get their 1/3. You know, it's no slam dunk kind of thing. So,
Well, and in Pittsburgh, Jordan, in Pittsburgh's an interesting case too, because that was recent. Someone was blinded and they have the netting up. But that doesn't actually, if you, as long as you have the baseball rule, the owners are not going to have to pay any medical bills. I mean, it's really, if you got rid of that rule and you had netting up in Pittsburgh, if that happened, after that happened, the owner, they would have got together and they would have said, well, what can we do now to make sure that doesn't happen again, or to prevent that in the future? Because we're the ones who are going to have to pay this. And, we want to prevent that from happening. And that's where, when you're going to see the sort of like creative development of fan safety and other netting ideas. Right now, all they can just say, well, we did what we had to do, and you're out of luck because of the baseball.
Unfortunately, baseball's business model, I mean, obviously they won't come out and say anything like this, but it's kind of like the unspoken, let's crush them and leave them behind, because that's ultimately all they can do once they do crush you. There's no real genuine apology available because they know the victim is automatically, victims that we have talked to, they're automatically, way into this discussion by the time I get to them or they get to me. There's a protocol in place with baseball. It's these nonsense gestures, and it's a delay tactic. And in some cases, the aftermath is even worse than the injury. One woman who had her jaw wired shut for 2 months, I'm not going to mention the name of the team, Major League Club. They said, send us the bills, send us the bills, send us the bills. And then after 8 months, they ghosted her. That's a new term that people use these days. They just stopped talking to her. So that pisses me off. So there you go.
Hannah, are there any other questions?
I had a question, and maybe this is diverging too much from the question of fan safety, but fans aren't the only people in the stands. You have vendors walking through selling stuff. You have stewards and other event staff, security. I would imagine that workplace safety, OSHA, workers' comp insurance companies would have an interest in reducing the liability there. What's their role in this landscape?
Greg, I'll just jump in for 30 seconds. Probably 45 the way I roll. But and then you can take it from there. I had connection with OSHA and had a really good call with somebody who knew OSHA very well. He was a semi-retired guy, and he really didn't say there was a door unless open for the employees unless they bring it themselves. And nobody's really looking out for the benefit of the fan. Greg, I think you were exploring state by state, potentially this regulation in a state that may want to get in on this conversation. So I encourage any attorney listening in some of those states that are clearly the worst offenders to contact me, and potentially maybe there's intervention on a state by state level. So go ahead, Greg, sorry.
I don't have anything to add to that. That's a great approach. I briefly looked into it. But you know, there's a creative solution possibly right there. So I appreciate
Yeah, it
someone
would be
mentioning
great
that
if anyone
actually.
wants to get in
Yes.
touch. Greg, you could you're listed and I'm certainly listed. So hopefully an attorney will be curious and call us.
Yeah, when
If
you
I
think
can,
of your experience at a ballpark, most of the ushers are not even looking at the field. They're looking up in their section
I
and,
know.
and they're in more
Yeah.
danger than some of the fans probably. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Hannah.
oh, yeah, I just wanted to say two things. If people were interested in taking action to become more involved with this, how would they go about doing that? What are some suggestions and tips? Maybe Jordan, if you
Yeah,
started
I
with
mean,
how people could become part of that,
sure,
part of the
sure.
conversation.
So I'm here, Jordan Scott at foulballsafetynow.com. So love to hear from you and talk with you. Happy to come talk to a virtual class in high school or college, or any attorneys want to connect and talk. Many attorneys, I actually talked to about 50 law school students. 3 of them are working with me currently. 2 or 3 of them are working with me currently. One in Illinois and one in Washington D.C. And they all seem to have heard about this, maybe introduced to the baseball rule from their torts professors in law school. So it's kind of an engaging discussion that I'm happy to have with any law professor that wants to say, come on in, Jordan, for a day or for an hour or whatever. So just contact Jordan Scott. You'll see the website, Foul Ball Safety Now, and we'll have a conversation where to take it from there.
Great.
Yeah.
I have a quick question here in our webinar chat that maybe we can just slip in. It says, I assume many of the jumbo screens are insured. If the jumbo screens are required to be protected by netting, then why not provide the fans with similar protection? Is it possible to purchase additional insurance coverage to protect against potential injury by attending a baseball game? If so, couldn't this coverage be added to the ticket price if that was even possible? Would the insurance coverage require additional netting? I guess, Greg, that might be you, or it might
Go
not.
ahead, Greg.
Yeah, no, that's an
Yeah,
interesting
Greg.
thought. It's an interesting
Yeah.
thought. I guess one issue in the foul ball injuries and purchasing insurance for possible injury like that is that it feels kind of remote. It feels very speculative that it's going to be it's going to be something that you ever need to insure against. Even it feels like it's probably not going to happen to you, and it's probably not going to happen to somebody in your row, even if it regularly happens. So I think there's a little bit of disconnect there just between how remote that the risk feels and whether or not you would seek out a policy for it. Now, whether or not the owners should be required to carry insurance for that purpose is a great idea. And yes, they should be required to carry insurance for that purpose. They feel no need right now to carry insurance for that purpose because of there's no scenario or very few scenarios where they're going to be held liable for it in the first place in most states due to the baseball rule or the Baseball Liability Act here in Illinois. And so that would be getting rid of that legal doctrine. Changing that would change a lot of other things. And you would probably see some developments in the insurance industry there.
Excellent. Thank
They were
you.
required to be on the hook for it. Yeah.
Well, I think it is 2 o'clock, so we should wrap up. But what I would suggest is that everybody gives their website handle so that people can look you up, can investigate the topic. We at the Tort Museum are www.tortmuseum.org. Jordan, do you just want to give your details as well? And then Ken and Greg?
Oh, sure. No, this was great. And, it's just beginning of spring training, love to do something monthly. That's a little aggressive. I think it requires all of our attention. So I'm looking for getting new people on board. So thanks for having me and Greg. So I think we would love to come back as the season goes. And yes, please just feel free to reach out, Jordan Scott. You'll see the website Foul Ball Safety Now. And yeah, thanks again for joining today.
Excellent, Jordan. Ken, will you give your website handle as well?
Yeah, we're at www.leagueoffans.org, and you can put in the search for foul balls. We have a couple articles and actually a podcast on there on this topic. But I would suggest everyone who's really interested in getting involved in this to a high degree contact Jordan, because as far as I know, there's not anyone in the country that has more research or passion for this topic. So I hope you keep up the good battle, Jordan, and same with you, Greg. If there's anyone out there listening that can have some legal ideas to help Greg out, please reach out to him too, because it is a serious issue that is just not being fully addressed by Major League Baseball at all. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Excellent.
well, Ken Reed's and Jordan Scott's websites are way better than my own. So, yeah, those are great resources, and happy to talk to anybody about these issues. I have my own law firm in Chicago here, Wolkowski Law. Happy to connect. And yeah, thanks again, Melissa, and to everyone here. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you all for coming out and talking about this subject. And thank you for everyone that joined us today. We appreciate you, and have a great day. We'll all talk soon, I hope.